In this lecture, I want to talk about what drives news. Have you ever wondered why certain people or events get lots of media attention and others don't? Why is it news when, say, the 86-year-old Minister of Trade in your country gets sick, but not news when your grandfather of the same age becomes unwell? Over the years, the news industry has developed a set of protocols to determine what makes news. Some journalism textbooks call those factors news values. In our news literacy curriculum, we call them universal news drivers. The first news driver is importance. Certain information is crucial for the public to know. Key economic indicators such as the unemployment rate is a good example. Information that potentially has a big impact on the economy, politics, national security, health and so forth is very important for the public interest, and that's why it drives news. Prominence is another factor. Famous people such as actors, musicians and athletes often make news even when their actions are not necessarily that important for the public. Why? Well, because many people care about those celebrities and feel some personal connections. They would want to know more. Prominence also includes people with leading positions. The Minister of Trade, for example, may not be that famous, but her well-being affects her society and so it's in the public interest. On to the next driver. Let's say you come across a video on YouTube that shows a woman violently slapping a man, presumably her boyfriend or husband, over and over and over again in the streets of Hong Kong, shouting and screaming. Do you see any news value in the clip? This has really happened here in Hong Kong and made news not just in the city, but also around the world, from Britain to the United States to Australia. Seemingly, we humans tend to like to know more about disagreement among people. From some banal events like a celebrity divorce to more serious social issues such as labour disputes. Conflict universally drives news. Another driver that also tells us what people would want to hear is human interest. Certain events stir our emotions. A baby rescued from the rubble after an earthquake, a dying child saved by a bone marrow donor, families reunited after 50 years. Such stories strike a chord. Particularly sad, tragic stories also make news for the same reason. The magnitude of an event is another factor that makes a difference. A small plane crash in another country far away, leaving 3 people dead, is probably not news in your country. But if a commercial jumbo jet crashes and all of its 420 passengers are killed, it becomes news around the world. The numbers in the story speak volumes. A high number of victims in a natural disaster can make the story more newsworthy, as does a huge lottery jackpot. But even when the scale of the incident is small, if it's close to home geographically or psychologically, it can be newsworthy. For example, I said a small plane crash in a foreign country won't be news in your country, but if all 3 passengers who were killed in the accident were teenage backpackers from your country, I'm sure it makes headlines. We care about what's happening in our community and people close to home. If an international news event has a local angle, it's more likely that we care about the story. Proximity is another factor that drives news. Now, previously I said your sick grandpa doesn't normally make news. But what if he's not 86 years old, but 135 years old? Do you think the public would be interested in knowing more about him? I guess most of you have immediately said yes. But why? It's the same person, same health problem. Why is his age such an important factor? Unusualness matters in the news industry. Something that's novel or unheard of has news values. Seasonal flu doesn't get as much media attention as Ebola, even though seasonal flu is a much bigger health issue in most countries than Ebola. News audiences pay attention to something different, something rare and something unique. Another universal news driver is timeliness. Breaking news is a good example of that. Something that's unfolding right now has a strong news value on social media and also for 24/7 TV news channels because it gets the audience excited to be the witness or follower of a news event as it's happening. A building on fire right now is news. A fire that's been put out 2 hours ago with no damage is no longer news for most people. The concept of time drives news. Anniversaries of major news events, for example, fall into this category, as well as popular trends and latest fads. Our society as a whole shares the sense of time together and expects timely reporting of the information. Relevance, usefulness and practicality of the information also drives news. This type of story often contains some information that helps news audiences improve their situations. News reports related to education, internet security, financial planning. Any new information that can be relevant and useful to many members of the public has a news value. The universal news drivers tell us what makes information newsworthy. Now, as I said at the beginning, different journalism educators and textbooks might use different terminology to describe these news values. Some have 7 drivers and others have 10. In this video, we listed 9. The important lesson for the news audience here is that we should be able to recognise the values each news story contains. With this knowledge, we can act as our own gatekeepers, prioritising news stories and the information they have. Naturally, most news stories have more than one news driver. And journalists say normally the more drivers the story has, the bigger the news is. Recognising those universal news drivers in the news is also an important step to understand how and why the news media present the world and reality to us in the ways that they do.